So, Assalamualaikum everyone. I'd like to share with you these slides or issues or topics regarding understanding conflict management style. This is your friend, Brother Chuars Alferez of the Order of the Discalced Carmelite Secular. So, what is conflict management style and why do we need to know this? So, conflict management style, form of behavior that a person practices in response to conflict with others when living and interacting with others on campus or in your work. You need to know how to resolve issues in different situations. So here comes the conflict. Where does it come from? The first is the goal. What about this goal? Conflict can happen as a result of conflicting goals or priorities. It can also happen when there is a lack of shared goals. That's why in an organization, goals is very, very important. Then second is the personality conflict. Personality conflict are a common cause of conflict. Sometimes there is no chemistry or you have not figured out an effective way to click with somebody. So that's more on personality conflict. Then the scarce resources is the another one. Conflict can happen when you are competing over scarce resources. And I think that's the reality. Kung kulang talaga yung resources, kaya nga nagkakaroon talaga ng tinatawag nating conflict. Then what about the styles? People have different styles. Your thinking style or communication style might conflict with somebody else's thinking style or their communication style. The good news is that conflict in style are easy to adapt to when you know how. That's why it's good to know what are the different styles so that we can adapt this one. Then the values. The last one is the values. Sometimes you find conflict in values. The challenge here is that values are core. Adapting with style is one thing, but dealing with conflict values is another. That's why a particular business, a group, or a culture may not be a good fit for you. It's also why birds of a feather or the same feather flock together, and why opposites attract but similarities bind. That's why it's good also to know about the values. Then there is something positive when they talk about conflict. What about the positive side? Conflict can teach you to make the most of its situation and use it as a learning opportunity or a leadership opportunity, and then that's true. Then you can also use it as an opportunity to transform the situation into something better. So that's the positive side of the so-called conflict. Now we proceed. What about the 5 styles of conflict? So this is it, the different styles of conflict. You'll experience some of the form or internal or external conflict while living with the roommates or some point in your degree, in your career as professional or even a college career. Understanding how you handle conflict is important in helping you decide how to deal with stress and manage certain situation. Then if you look at the diagram, people have different ways of handling conflict. When people are living together, conflict is sure to arise. So that's the reality, that's the real talk. It is important to know how to handle stressful situations, but it is also important to know how people you live with react to conflict or will react to conflict. For example, You may be ready to talk about the situation to bring solutions to it immediately, whereas your roommate or maybe your workmate or maybe your classmate may need 30 minutes to get her or his thoughts together. Well, take the rest of this lesson to learn 5 of the main styles of the conflict management. The image above is the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument, which is the model for handling conflict. You can see on the X, this one, the X and the Y axis, that there are two sides of conflict management. So the X and the Y axis, these are the two sides of conflict management. We have the assertive as well as the cooperative. Then by using this diagram, you can see that avoiding is low on both assertive as well as the cooperative. Look at this avoiding, so low. Then Thomas Kilmann, the 5 management styles or a glance. So these styles is very helpful to all of us. Then what about this competing? You look at the competing. High on assertive, then low in cooperative. The competing. Then the next is collaborating. So this is the collaborating. High in both assertive as well as in cooperative. So high. Then accommodating is low in assertive, then high in cooperative. So accommodating. Then compromising. You look at the compromising. Compromising, according to Stephen Covey, this is the win-win solution. Okay? Is the middle between the assertive as well as the cooperative. So we'll talk about this style for more details. So when they talk accommodating, so you look at the slide, people who accommodate are unassertive and very cooperative. Give in during a conflict, then acknowledge they made a mistake, decide it was no big deal, then put relationship first, ignore issues, then try to keep peace at any price, then effective when the other person or party has a better plan or solution. Then people who use this accommodating style often neglect their own concern to satisfy the concerns of others. Accommodating is the opposite of competing. People who accommodate may be selfishly generous or charitable. They may also obey another person when they would prefer not to or yield to others' point of view. They work on their own goals or objectives to reach a desired outcome. They may have to give in to reach the desired outcome. Then accommodating may preserve future relationship with conflicting person or party. So that's more on accommodating style. Next is the avoiding style. So avoiding, people who avoid conflict are generally unassertive and uncooperative. Take note, unassertive and uncooperative. Avoid the conflict entirely or delay their response instead of voicing concerns then can create some space in an emotional environment and not a good long-term strategy. Take note, this avoiding style. Then when someone uses avoidance, they are not helping the other party reach their goals. They are not assertively pursuing their own. To do this, they may diplomatically sidestep or postpone decisions until a better time, withdraw from threatening situation or diverts attention. They perceive conflict as hopeless and therefore something to be avoided. Differences are overlooked and they accept disagreement. This works when the issue is trivial or when you have no chance of winning. It is also very effective when the atmosphere is emotionally charged and you need to create some space. Sometimes issues will resolve themselves, but in general, avoiding is not a good long-term strategy. Hope is not a strategy. So take note once again, avoiding is not a good long-term strategy. And it is said that hope is not a strategy. So that's more on avoiding. What about collaborating? Collaborators are both assertive and cooperative. So if you still remember the diagram, asserts on views while also listening to other views and welcoming differences, seek a win-win outcome, then identify underlying concerns of a conflict, then create room for multiple ideas, then requires time and effort from both parties. In addition, when we talk about collaborating, people who collaborate work together, make plans to improve situation or achieve goals in both parties. They attempt to work with others to find solutions that fully satisfy the concerns of both parties. That's why it's collaboration. This can be effective of conflict scenarios where a novel solution is needed. This can also mean reframing a challenge to accept the more room for everybody's ideas. The downside, it is it requires a high degree of trust, and reaching the consensus can require a lot of time and effort. It takes work to get everybody on board and to synthesize a variety of potentially conflicting ideas. Then people using this style often recognize there is tensions in relationship and contrasting viewpoints, but want to work through conflict. So that's more on collaborating. So what about the next style, competing? People who approach conflict in a competitive way, assert themselves and do not cooperate while pursuing their own concern at another's expense. Then take on a win-lose approach where one person wins and one person loses. Does not rely on cooperation with the other parties to reach outcome. Then maybe appropriate for emergencies when time is important. So the win-lose solution when we talk about competing. Nanalo ang isa, natalo ang isa. Then to compete, people take a power of orientation and use whether power seems appropriate to win, even at the expense of the other party. This may include arguing, pulling rank, or instigating sanctions. Competing may mean standing up and defending on the position believed to be correct and simply trying to win. Forcing is another way of viewing competition. People using a forcing style perceive that some people are right and others are wrong. Then this approach may be appropriate for emergencies when time is of the essence and when you need quick, decisive action. People should be aware of and support the approach. This is not a good conflict management style for handling normal conflict situations due to the fact that it demands only one person to be completely right and the other completely wrong. It is rarely actually the case. Most of the time, both parties need to be often to changing part of their behavior. So now you know this style. a win-loss solution. Then the next style is compromising. Compromisers are moderately assertive and moderately cooperative. So, ibig sabihin, kanina nakita natin sa diagram na sa sentro. Okay? To try to find fast, mutually accepted solutions to conflict that partially satisfy both parties. So, partially satisfy both parties, then result in a lose-lose approach. So, parang talo lahat kasi nag-compromise. Then, appropriate temporary action solutions then considered an easy way out when you need more time to collaborate to find a better solution. Then the concept of this being a lose-lose situation should be confusing. Basically, it means that no one is going to get exactly what they want, but everyone benefits in some way. The trap is to fall into compromising is an easy way out, with collaborating would produce a better solutions even though it requires more work. Compromisers give up less than accommodators, but more than competitors. They expose issues more than avoiders, but less than collaborators. Their solutions often involve splitting the difference or exchanging concessions. Conflict is mutual difference, best resolved by cooperation and compromise. It may be appropriate for scenarios where you need a temporary solutions or where both sides have equally important goals. So that's more on compromising style when they talk about conflict management. Now, the question, which one is the best out of the 5? Take note, out of the 5. So in your own situation, especially in resolving conflict, which one is the best? It is said that there is no best way to handle conflict. Each conflict is different and requires a different response. Then, as a society, ito yung mga tinuturo natin. 2 heads are better than 1. That's more on collaborating. Then, kill your enemies with kindness. That's more on accommodating. Then, split the difference. That's compromising. Then, live well enough alone. So, that's avoiding. Then, might makes right. That's more on competing. Usually, after getting the results of the test or assessment, the first question people ask is, what are the right answers? In the case of conflict handling behavior, there is no universal right answers. All 5 modes are useful in some situations. Each represent a set of useful social skills. The effectiveness of a given conflict handling mode depends upon the requirements of the specific conflict situations and the skill with which the mode is used. Each of us is capable of using all the 5 conflict handling modes. Few could be characterized as having a single, rigid style of dealing with conflict. However, more people use some modes better than the others and therefore tends to rely upon those modes more heavily than others. So that's it. So take note, there is no best way to handle conflict. Each conflict is different and requires a different response. So to conclude with this topic, the different conflicts management styles may be used when faced with different situations. So take note on that. The next is knowing yourself and fully understanding each situation will help you understand the conflict management style needed. Then try a scenario-based approach to test the effectiveness of the different approaches to your specific situation. And then I think in our own experience, we were able to apply all this management style. It really depends on the situation. Then by knowing your own patterns, you improve your self-awareness. Once you are aware of your own patterns, you can pay attention to whether they are working for you, or you can explore another alternatives. By using a scenario-based approach, you can choose more effective conflict management style and test their effectiveness for you and your situation. So that's it, all my friends, all my students. So thank you very much. God bless. Dalaygon ang Diyos. This is your friend, Brother Joars Alferez.